Hi, my name is Tabitha Wallace, and I did my project on Benjamin Franklin. So Benjamin Franklin did not have a family that was well off. So because of this, he was not able to afford to go to school like most other kids. Of course, back in those days, it was almost normal for kids not to be able to afford to go to school. So because of this, Benjamin Franklin self-educated himself. He taught himself how to read and write, and nothing can get him down. He was excited to learn different things. He took his knowledge and passed it on to others. So because of this, we find that Benjamin Franklin had this drive to learn, to teach, and to become an educator of those who might not have gotten education otherwise. So this is why he is an important figure in education. Now, one of the influential things that I thought about him was that he was self-educated. Because he was self-educated, he was able to learn how to communicate with others. He did it through writing and publications and readings. He wrote his own newspaper to help get information out to other people. And through this self-education, he was able to show others that it is possible to get an education without going to school. That you can teach yourself to learn, to read and write. It doesn't have to be in a formal education classroom. He taught people that even though school is important, if you are not able to go, you can still teach yourself to read and write and other educational aspects that they might need to learn. Which is true even today, because as kids are growing up, the 3s, the 4s, before they go to school, if they do not have a parent that is educating them, who is helping them learn to read, helping them to gain knowledge that they would need to go into school, they have to teach themselves how to read. Some kids listen to words and see how they are written just to figure out how to read. Now, the other thing that was important was that he created the first library. And he created the first library because he wanted to make it possible for all people to be able to get books into their hands. He didn't just want the rich people that could be able to afford the books to have books to read. He wanted books to become knowledge, to bring knowledge into the world, and that everybody, rich, poor, in different nations, different countries, could all have access to books when they were in America through the first library that he created. And the other thing that was influential about Benjamin Franklin is that he was an inventor. Now, he might have, by some, been considered one of the greatest inventors there ever was. After all, he invented created a clean burning stove, bifocals, which are still used today, and the lightning rod. And he was also considered a scientist, and he charted out the Gulf Stream, and he discovered new properties of electricity. Now, the most famous story we all know about Benjamin Franklin is that he took a kite out in a lightning storm with a key attached to it to see if lightning would strike the key, which he proved that it did, and that electricity was conductive. Now, one of Benjamin Franklin's quotes that I liked was, "If you would not be forgotten as soon as you are dead, if you would not like to be forgotten as soon as you are dead, either write something worth reading or do things that are worth writing about." Which is interesting to think about, because sometimes we don't think about our legacy that we leave behind like he did. He invented things, he wrote things, he passed down his knowledge to other people. So some of his educational ideas that I found that were interesting was creative polymathy, which is when he was considered the first person that was creative polymathy. And this means that someone has creative accomplishment in more than one academic area, which we all know Benjamin Franklin was. He had scientists under his belt. He was a communicator. He was a writer. He was a reader. He he did all kinds of different things. And this is something that is important to help our young people understand nowadays, is they do not have to limit themselves to one thing. They can do multiple things. And we should help our children and guide them by what they want, by what should be important and what they think they can do, and help them accomplish their goals. The other thing that is important idea in education that he thought of, that he promoted, was writing. He thought writing was a big deal. He taught writing. He wrote newspapers. He wrote newspaper articles. He wrote in communication. It was one of the things that he was famous for. I mean, he had to write down all of his science experiments. So I think the way we communicate sometimes in nowadays, Benjamin Franklin would be highly surprised, because communication is not as, we all stare at our phones or do something like that instead of talking to people. So, in the last part that for educational ideas that I had is reading, which I mentioned in the other section because he made a library. He thought reading and writing were core components to teaching other people. So because of this, Benjamin Franklin thought reading was an important part of school, an important part of learning, and he wanted to make sure to emphasize that in everything that he did. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation on Benjamin Franklin.